of you're just having to trust these shady offshore entities that they're telling the truth. Binance says they're fine. They show proof of reserves, but what are their liabilities? He blamed all the wrongdoing of FTX on Alameda Research. And he said, I don't control Alameda Research. Even though he was the owner, he's no longer literally had a $10 billion account that he mislabeled with Alameda Research.
Mislabeled?
Yeah, I have 2 employees, and both of them are overseas. Like one of them's in London, one of them's in Ukraine. And so for me, I have to pay them, and I have to do that. And it's like sort of what's left after the guy who kind of was spearheading this bill was a fraud. It's kind of tough. I was actually randomly your hands in both pockets. But publicly, he's just he's donating to Democrats because he says, oh, I'm like this, I care about all these issues.
Yeah.
But it's even more cynical than just buying one party. I lied my way into it. I can sort of lie my way out of it. And this is what he did. So prior to this, I'd interviewed him twice before, and I had kind of gotten hamstrung with he's just so good at dodging stuff. Actually, his whole technique of shifting the blame onto Alameda and I don't control Alameda, I've seen something very similar. I'm investigating this Ponzi scheme that's offshore, where it's you can donate through super PACs, political action committees, and you can donate as much as you want, and you don't have to your name has to appear nowhere. And so that's actually a good person in the space to where people thought, okay, well, if he's saying it, he's a guy who only says positive things about crypto because he's a crypto executive. So if he's saying there might be problems, there's probably some problems.
But
is he on Twitter? I probably butchered his name, but he was actually originally sort of an ally of Sam. So he invested in FTX early on, put $100 million in, and this is what was going on in crypto. They're called collateralized loans. But what FTX was doing was they were saying, hey, we'll take $1 million from you, but instead of giving you actually campaign finance laws, I've heard are pretty weak. I forget the name of the law, but it was passed in the early 2000s, 2010s maybe, where it actually became very easy to donate. You're going to make some money. And so people invested in FTX thinking that this is going to be a safe platform. This kid is smarter than everyone else. He's this stuff. And you start to have repeat occurrences. I just cover stuff all the time, and you see echoes of the same thing. I just had somebody just a couple of days ago I was interviewing for this news scheme we're looking at, and he said, I God mode on Ultimate Bet, where the CEO could see everybody's hands and play on the site, seeing everybody's hands. So they wanted to store some Bitcoin with Tom Brady. They wanted to be alongside Tom Brady. So he's like, there was fungibility between wallets. In the terms of service, they said results may vary. What's that about? Mm-hmm. I mean, ultimately, it's and so I realized there's this sophisticated way that they're preying on my psychology, and all the crypto people were trying to control regulations to favor their individual business situation. And so CZ felt like he was being cut out in Washington. I'm blanking on the name right now. But
A1Z? What is that?
No. I'm sorry. I'm blanking on. It's this famous. I'm going to remember it right after I get out of here. It's one of the famous. Where's the money? I don't know. But he controls everything. And so it's this is the tactic of these offshore companies is you put
and sell off all his tokens. Would they be still solvent today or still in operation today? Would they not crash, or was this
these exchanges where it was worth more? So he was arbitraging this difference in prices, and then after he made his money that way, your issue is that anytime there's demand for withdrawals, you're going to encounter problems. So it was going to be inevitable anytime any store on sticks or something. It was never. The problem was the foundation was wrong from the beginning. If you don't have enough deposits to cover withdrawals, you just don't have the money, right? You're $10 million or your data's lost forever. And you're call the police, and you go, hey, track this guy. And they're like, to what? To a Bitcoin wallet? To act that bill. And now that it was all a fraud, or the guy who basically pushed it was a fraud, now they're trying to retool it. Company, so they have to report everything. So if you're offshore, you can kind of not do any of that. You can play fast and loose. And, for some people, they think that's better. They can offer, let's say, like 100x leverage, what that was, to hide it from people who were trying to take a look at his books. But it's just, that's what I mean by black box. You never know what games these guys are playing. Like they say, oh, here's sort of like the rough estimate of our balance. Like the house always wins, right? So when FTX was taking off, it just seemed like everyone who was a someone was backing him. So then it was okay. And then I think a lot of these people deferred. We don't know. I mean, there's only a few that are bigger. Like there's Binance, very opaque company. We don't exactly know.
And what has happened to Binance since FTX went?
And so now it's trying to be sorted out by the guy who literally unraveled Enron. And he says, this lawyer goes, it's worse than Enron. Put like let's say I have Ethereum, one Ether into this mixer, right? This pool of money. A bunch of people are putting one Ethereum into balances. But oops, did I tell you about this $10 billion account? Like I forgot. It's so silly. You find crypto keys all the time. I mean, it's kind of an interesting idea where you go, I'm going to get in before everyone else. But I hadn't really found my footing. But throughout my entire life, I had kind of had this relationship with like hucksters and fraud where, when I was in high school, my mom got thyroid cancer. So CZ says, hey, maybe they don't have the money. I don't know, whatever. I'm just going to sell like $2 billion worth.
But he knew what he was doing.
Oh, for sure. He's a shark. Basically screaming about, all these scammers online. And unlike my previous work, which kind of had resonated, like it had gotten
easier or more profitable for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why would he do that?
I'm not as familiar with the regulation side of things. People were talking about that a lot. Most of this $10 billion is just their own tokens. So CZ takes this opportunity to kind of spread some, sort of information about that. He says, hey, we're actually, and then you'll launch your own token that people can invest in, sort of like they're investing almost in your crypto exchange. And so that was actually one of the ways that FTX, this stuff went down. And a report comes out from CoinDesk where it shows FTX's balance sheet. It shows actually what tokens they have. For one of the first times, it was kind of grifting here. And so, but you'd see them in nice cars. And so I was like, what am I looking at? And then as I'm doing my YouTube show, I'm like, I get fed a bunch of Ethereum. What are we tracking here? And then it goes to some mixer somewhere, and then we don't know where it goes after that.
So when Sam Bankman-Fried was working with
if you're from this one, you're not okay. Or I might say, hey, like CZ has connections to China, like maybe that's a problem. Or CZ has connections to here, maybe that's a big deal. Really going to sell most of our FTT that we got from that deal. And we're going to sell it. We don't know what's going on there. And all of a sudden it starts this firestorm because people are like, you can watch them. These are real people, Joe. You can be just like them. And so I started watching this and I started like seeing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Everybody. I ask him and he doesn't want to talk to me. So but he's going on these Twitter spaces. So I was tracking when he'd go on a Twitter space, and I would contact the people ahead of time and said, hey.
I really enjoyed you catching him on Twitter spaces. I really enjoyed that. I listened to that whole thing because before that, you have this guy who's this,
of ads, like get rich quick schemes. Like you've got a bunch of people, flexing in their Lamborghinis telling you, they're like 25 years old telling you want to get rich by 25 or 22. I'll show you. I made $1 million. Fine. And then FTX US went bankrupt. And he's the one who put it into bankruptcy. And then he's telling everyone, oh, no, the money's actually still there. I mean, he was constantly giving a conflicting narrative. Lateral, like dollars or like some asset will give you FTT tokens, which is their own invented coin. And that should have value if anything goes wrong. And people were accepting that as value. But there was already all this worry in the past. That summer, there had been a bunch of companies that collapsed. And people had never thought FTX. It was kind of the first time anyone thought FTX could maybe not have the money. Sort of, this is a fraud because, no one knew. There's a bunch of backing. So I made a video at the time being like, this crypto CEO just describes a Ponzi scheme.
Like what exactly, like what are the regulations in terms of like what you're allowed to do and donate and how did he violate them?
So I think the big violation was you're not supposed to.
The fact that they were all living together and fucking each other in this giant penthouse, this $40 billion penthouse. The things, it's insane. It's really, I almost wish
Senator's office reached out to me. They're like, "What do you think about this?" And I was like, "I don't know, man. You guys have to. This is y'all's thing to figure out. Ultimately, y'all." What he said in one of the interviews, he goes, "No one believes me when I said I donated dark because no one believes anyone would be like, everyone wants the credit for donating. No one believes that I just do it on the sly." But ultimately, the outcome of that is like, yeah, I encrypt all your data. Joe, send me, I know you're this successful podcaster. I want you to send me that money for some type of crypto token. There's a lot of different tokens out there. And
explain tokens, because I don't understand tokens. I know there's crypto and there's tokens. Like, what is the difference between the two?
They have to say what they have, where they're putting their money. They're subject to more regulation about like how they take care of customer deposits. One of the big things with FTX was they told people, "Hey, you put your money with us. We're not going to touch it. We're not going to move it." That's what but FTX was sort of the worst offender. Is let's say I give you a loan, Joe. So an unsecured loan would be I give you $1 million and I don't ask for anything. And from the arms of one huckster to another. Like, it's just like almost to something worse. They're a
whiz kid who you listen to him talk. He has an answer for everything. He's so articulate. He's so knowledgeable. Like, I listened to previous interviews before he got busted.
Okay, so this is funny. They found his League of Legends account, and during some of the calls after it was a fraud, you could hear him clicking in the background. Click, 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 click. He's playing League. It is the experience of the lawyer that FTX then hires is like being complicit on a leaked private call, trying to cover up this God mode scam, this big mess right now, and we're waiting for regulators to figure it out. Finally, regulators have stepped on the scene, but right now it's just this kind of wild, wild west. They're like, "Hey, don't work a 9-to-5 job, like be free like me." And I'm like, "You're here on a Sunday at like 5 p.m. How free are you really? Like, myself." They kind of shut down. Myself and some other people were saying, like, we think they're insolvent because we had taken a look at their numbers and we said, there's no way they have the money for this. They don't have the token.
Finance hasn't had similar problems.
No, they've had a few runs and they've covered withdrawals. I mean, so it's just, the problem is a lot of it's a black box.
What is it's a crypto exchange, right? So
Yeah,
how does that work?
So the first question is when you learn about crypto, eventually got paid out like $2 billion.
Well,
yeah. Some of it was in this FTT token though. So they have a bunch of FTT, right? And so it's like November was when all the Coinbase or something like that.
Right.
So FTX launches. Let's start with who Sam Bankman-Fried is. He's kind of at the center of all of this. Sam Bankman-Fried is this guy he's the son of two Harvard lawyers, really perpetuated their fraud. I can break it down. How much do you know about the FTX
Let's
situation?
break it down for people that don't know about it. So
let's do it. So FTX was this crypto exchange.
Inevitable.
It was inevitable. So something to understand. FTX was insolvent long before it was realized that they were insolvent. Right? So that found out how to be successful. And if you invest with me, I'll save you time. You could do it yourself, Joe. You could do it. But it's going to take you 5 years. Get with me, and I'm going to shortcut your success.
I don't really understand what's going – like the FTX thing, for example, is the best one. Because I was so in the dark about this thing. I was like, what is happening? Like, what are they doing? Try to break it down for us. Like, first of all, so when I see something like that go down, I'm like, how did he get Steven Spielberg? How does someone like a Bernie Madoff or Sam Bankman-Fried, how does he get these people to do this?
And like one of the first things the guy does is he controls it, but he renounces ownership. He goes, "Oh, I'm passing it off to some sham director," and he goes, "I don't have anything to do. I don't know."
Down because it seems like they received additional scrutiny, right? Because now people are starting to look at it, and I saw that their value went down considerably.
Regulation for, I guess, offshore crypto exchanges, right?
And so these campaign finance, these violations.
I saw all this, and my experiences up to that point, it kind of led me to like, I want to say something, but why is nobody saying anything? It just seemed like there was this, these people pitching this stuff and nobody was talking about it. So I made this random video so I decided to start pursuing it step by step. And at first it was like just me discovering like, well, what is this? Well, how does this scheme work? Okay, so I buy this course and then what? Really, everyone got to look at it all at once in one place. And people notice, like, wait a second. A lot of their assets are just their own tokens. Like they had a Serum token, which they control most of. He's a shark. He knows what he's doing.
What was the conflict between the two of them that led him to do that?
The conflict was, it's a great question. The conflict was ultimately that Sam was trying to get some regulations passed, and
it was like 70,000 or something like
60 plus, yeah.
So that's the lure. The lure is you buy in for pennies, and one day you're insanely rich. I'm sure you know about that.
That is his background. And so I asked, Sam, I was like, what does it say if this is your chief regulatory officer? This guy's wire transfer, and it's kind of expensive to do these. Like, you pay all these fees for wire transfers. So the idea is like, okay, well, if you have crypto, those wire fees can go down. And instead of taking, maybe a day or something, it'll take like...
Party.
That's right. But
also to the Republicans.
This is what's wild. So
yeah,
Sam knew publicly in our current American climate, like...
Through crypto.
Ransomware. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%. Because before it was like, okay, you need to use like Western Union or sort of one of these places where you can kind of send money without too much scrutiny, do these trades that are profitable in crypto. So the way he first made his money was he did something where he bought Bitcoin in the U.S. and then he sold it on these Japanese. It's sort of like hard. You kind of have to disprove every single, like there's always a new like health guy telling you that there's some new alternative discovery, whatever. And I was like, this is kind of weird. And I was like, why do they wanted to basically influence politics by just donating? And the idea is you donate to both sides, you can never lose, right?
Yeah.
If you have yours, then he comes up, prep school. He's kind of like built for success, right? He goes to MIT, goes to Jane Street as this quantitative trader, and that's ultimately what he was doing. But it also looks like he was donating through some of his executives. And, I mean, the whole thing was shady all the way down. Like, handle now is they're finding a bunch of campaign finance violations because he was trying to influence politics, U.S. politics. I mean, it's insane how deep it means playing League of Legends while on investment calls. Like, at the time, that was seen as this charming, like, genius thing.
On calls.
You could hear even actually, okay, yeah, tokens like is the individual, you can think of currency, right? So it's like the individual. So Bitcoin is, you have Bitcoin, then you have, it's one of the cryptocurrencies. You have Ethereum. These guys basically, a lot of these people backed Sam with the highest endorsements. And so if you're just an average person, you're thinking, well, how much more due diligence can I do than all these other guys? And ultimately, one of the ways, like even some of the candidates they donated to were through like a third employee we didn't even know about. And they were like donating through them for like all these...
Or is it just pure addiction? I think, those multiplayer games, those, online role-playing games, that's what that is, right? It's like
I think it's is it a MOBA? I really taken that. I mean, maybe some of them were taking it seriously, but not enough.
So if FTX didn't encourage regulation and CZ didn't get upset at that.
Touch your money, obviously. That was the whole point. It's like, you deposit with us, we're not going to do anything with your money. It's your money. It's like a deposit. Like it's almost like a bank. Like you deposit with a bank. Your bank isn't supposed to go ahead and take your money.
Do something like that. Like, why would he publicly communicate?
This is one of the... This is why it's so interesting to me to look at fraud. Like, this is why it fascinates me, as well as I think it's an important thing. Launches FTX in 2019, and that's a crypto platform where, honestly, you can make a lot more money than just with a trading firm. So FTX quickly skyrockets in popularity. They appreciate your transparency. Kind of kissing up a little bit. But I was just like, somebody has to ask him some real questions. So I had 2 prior little Twitter Space interactions with him. And he kept getting away with the fact that FTT tokens and pay everybody out.
Oh, that's what he thought? He's on amphetamines, right? So he can't be thinking totally clearly.
I didn't really know what I was looking at the time. Then I go to college, and all my friends get in MLMs. Multi-level marketing, sort of like, just like the, like, hey, you're going to get rich. So I was always getting invited to these like get rich investment funds. They invested in a bunch of NFT projects. Mark Andreessen, I think, is the guy who runs it. Or the CEO as of 2020. He hands it to this a girl he actually had a relationship with, Caroline Ellison, right? And she supposedly controlled it. He said she did every money. Like, well, how can you view this as a battle? Like, but he viewed it as like we're sparring partners. Like, and you won this round or you won the war.
Because he thinks this is going to go on forever.
There were things that were coming out, like questions about, okay, they say they have all this money. Where on chain is it? So like the blockchain, everything's publicly, you can see it. Now I can just send you $100K. It's going to take me 5 minutes.
So that's why when people kidnap people's data and things along those lines, they like to get paid.
You put $100,000 into this little mixer, and then it sends $100,000 out later, and nobody knows where that money came from.
What is a mixer? How does it work?
It's interesting. So the most famous example is tornado cap is not surgery. You can just treat it naturally. Just don't worry about, hey, don't listen to the doctors. Don't listen to your general practitioner. You can just treat it with like colloidal silver. And she would drink it up because she thought that would make her better. Ultimately, my dad convinced her, like, you got to get the surgery. Like, this ain't going to fly. You have to, ultimately get the surgery. You're like, it's this magic internet money.
Magic.
How do you get some of that? How do you get some of that magic internet money? Well, you have to go somewhere to buy it. And so it's a crypto exchange is where you kind of go. You put your fiat A16Z. It was one of those, Sequoia or A16Z. One of them wrote this glowing review of Sam, basically saying he's going to be one of the first trillionaires. I started hearing about these tokens. And they're like, hey, selling courses, like, it's always the new grift. You always have to find, because people figure it out. Like, they go like, oh, that actually doesn't work. Like, hey, drop shipping is not, he's one of the leaders at the NASDAQ. I mean, he was one of the go-to guys. And so you thought, well, I invest with Bernie, like, I can't lose. It's like almost, betting on the house. Hey, just make this problem go away. This is the CEO. Like, go blame it on somebody else. Go blame it on some, like, third party that got access to our website. Say it was like a glitch or something. And so that of was going on. Now he's still, like, trying to say he did nothing wrong. He maintains he's innocent, and right now, actually, the big like kind of scam.
Chemtrails.
Let me say this: if it's too good to be true, if they're offering market returns that you want to believe in, you go, man, I want to believe this is real. Gay, so like, can you do this?
So someone had to be gay to do it, like.
No, basically they were like, we need someone trustworthy we can trust to do this. So, hey, you're going to be the guy. Like, we never understood how Bernie Madoff got people because it seems so preposterous. And then I fell for something very similar. And what I noticed with all of these things, the thread is they bring on people like Tom Brady to promote it, Larry David in the Super Bowl. They kind of get buy-in from all these big sort of names and also reputable middleman because there's no one who controls like Bitcoin. Like, no one can say like no to a transaction. Now it's like there's nothing to stop you from sending that money, and then you not having sort of like it's maybe not big enough. They're good people, a lot of the people going after these guys, but it's like trying to catch everyone who's speeding because every day it's getting less valuable. So the question is, what do you do if you're in that country making money? If you want, they're setting it up with like, I used to be broke like you. Well, that's a strategy. A lot of these guys were never broke, right? It's just part of the story you have to tell to be really effective. It's like reasons that our banks have a bunch of anti-money laundering laws. There's a reason that they have all sorts of finance laws. It's not for their safety. It's for your safety. I mean, it's like they need to. It's a strange time, man, to be covering crypto because I tried to tell people for years that this scam problem, this fraud problem, you can't do that and then say, oops, I played a little too much of my video games and lost billions of dollars. Like, this doesn't fly.
Well, he wasn't saying that I played the video games and that's why I lost the money.
But everyone loses confidence. Everyone sells their FTT tokens. No one wants to buy it. It's worth nothing.
So how did this all fall apart?
Great question. So Friedberg, shady. This guy
allegedly shady.
Dan Friedberg. No, he's definitely shady. I'll say that. This guy.
What was his? I remember, but what was his?
Find out like there were just no adults in that room, and like the few adults that there were like, they had like a criminal lawyer. Well, anyway, I don't think he's actually been convicted of anything. I shouldn't say that. They had this guy Dan Free calling that a fraud early. I have a buddy of mine. He goes by Dirty Bubble Media on Twitter. He's like one of the Anon Twitter accounts. He was calling it a fraud, or with just put a bunch of garlic cloves in the pot. I still remember our house like reeked. She would put 60 cloves of garlic in a stew. Reputable people like BlackRock, Sequoia Capital, they all invest in this guy. Kevin O'Leary famously promoted it for like $18 million.
They gave him $18 million to promote it?
He says...
And then when you have him on, there's a lot of, I wasn't aware, I'm not sure, I'm not aware of that, I don't know. There was all this hemming and...
Is buying both, lying about it, so that you can get all the good press of like caring about all these social issues while also not caring at all something. Because I was just like, why does this make some people tens of millions of dollars and nothing happens? Why? He's like, well, like think of it like a box. And, you tell a bunch of investors, hey, if you put money in this box, we can get some money out. Executives, Ryan Salami or something. I think that's his last name. Salami. I don't know. I just don't know how to pronounce it. But he was like, yeah, the number 3 donor to the Republican Party. But it was all orchestrated through Sam.
It wasn't a scam. I've said this before because I root for nerds to like be that successful that you're just completely living outside the norms of society, just fucking. I watched the CEO, the new CEO, talk about it.
Yeah.
About him trying
That's John Ray.
Yeah. Trying to unravel it. And it's amazing.
Money system. Especially in our modern age, it seems like you can understand where they're coming from, the average person. He was, really well regarded in Wall Street. So when people invested with him, they knew the returns were insane, but FTX's influence went from the Bahamas reaching into the United States while technically not really being regulated by the United States.
Yeah, they were the number 2 donor to the Democratic Party. Bizarre that so many people got duped. And I felt the same way about Bernie Madoff. I'm not a financially aware person. I'm not into the market. I don't follow these things.
Pilfering FTX, the customer deposits, and was using it in Alameda Research, which was his trading firm, to try to make extra money, and he lost it.
And so this is all because it's on.
I used to play like a variant of League, so I know it's fun, but it's not like fun to the point. Look, this guy's whole thing was like, I'm this effective altruist.
Go back to making money again.
I don't think he thought he would repay everyone, but everyone thought like, oh, we'll just enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy. We'll restructure the company. We'll reopen. We'll just turn all the debt into new. I start covering it, and then I start to get cease and desist letters. They don't like that. So they start to send me, they say, hey, you better shut up or we're going to sue you. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to stop making these videos. He cleaned up on all his own customers, just basically taking their money. Like, oh, I know exactly when to fold. I know exactly when to bet. So he had God mode enabled, and then they found out. So it's like things are good for now. Yeah.
You don't know.
That was the problem with the FTX. Like, they had hidden all their numbers. Like, Sam had and basically shell games where you're hiding the money.
Yeah.
You're saying, oh, invest in this. This is going to become valuable later, but you actually own a bunch, right? The inflation rate, I think, is like 75% or something like that. It's an unimaginable, it's just out of control inflation. And if you hold on to your Turkish lira, you're in for a bad time. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like people get away with it. It's just there's too many people doing it. And you'll catch some people, but ultimately a lot of people will just basically skate by, even though by all rights they should have been. And why is so much of your balance sheet made up of your own tokens? It's a big question. So one of the things that FTX had done, and a lot of companies were doing at the time, LGBTQ plus causes. And it was through a guy, and the guy was like, I feel a little uncomfortable with this. And they said, well, we don't have anyone trustworthy at FTX we can donate through. That's the issue. Was FTX's problem was not CZ. Ultimately, he's kind of the guy who pushed over the House made.
What was the first video?
I started as sort of like an interview show, nothing about scams. I had a channel before it. So there was a lot of fear of missing out, or FOMO, in the markets at the time. You know, everyone thought, oh, crypto's, you have to get in now, right? Because if you get in now, all these other guys buy into him.
Right.
And then they themselves are kind of also looking at each other, being like, well, that guy did it. Like, what? It's the hottest deal. Not actually like this incredible business that you thought it was, that you're going to